The constant viewers of my YouTube platform may have noticed or sniffed that I am very suspicious and cynical towards Hollywood. I don't trust them because I know them. And I repeat, I spent 6 months out there a few years ago. Now, I went out there with bright lights in my eyes. I thought, I was going to pitch, I was going to go to auditions, I was going to buy myself a Beverly Hills mansion. I was fucking dumb. But millions of people like me, millions of idiots like me, do this every single day. You either end up a drug addict, basically a prostitute, or dead. Now, I was very lucky because I was living hand to mouth in the early, I'd say my first month out in LA, but I met a very successful Hollywood couple. And I'm not going to mention their names, but they were really, really good to me. They put me up. They looked after me. They had compassion for my situation. They set up the pitch meetings. They set up the auditions. It wasn't their fault that those auditions and pitch meetings weren't successful, but like everything in life, there's a dark side and a light side to everything. And Hollywood has a very dark side. Why am I talking about this? Because we have this subject of the air cut yet again. So as many of you know, and some of you may not know, David Ayer was brought on back in around 2014, 2015, to write and direct a Suicide Squad movie by Zack Snyder, who was running the DC Extended Universe at the time. David Ayer is a great director. Now, I don't think he directed Training Day, but I think he wrote and produced the movie, if I remember rightly, that starred Denzel Washington. He's a very talented writer, a very talented director, and he's a former military man. He's a very intelligent man. I've learned a lot from him, following him over on Twitter. So what happened was he wrote and directed his movie. He cast people like Jared Leto and Will Smith and Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, who was tremendous in the first movie. What happened was, because of the controversy and the polarizing reaction of Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, the studio and Jeff Johns, who was somewhat in charge behind the scenes, as well as Zack Snyder, started interfering. He decided there needed to be rewrites. So Jeff rewrote a lot of the movie and reutilized the movie to look very, very different, re-editing it, rewriting it, and David had no choice but to go and reshoot those rewrites. And so it was never the movie that, David Ayer wanted it to be. His movie was on the cutting room floor. It was edited by a pop music video company. They took away the beautiful original score that David had brought in a composer to do, and they just had lots of radio music. Great music, but personally, there's nothing better than a symphonic score in a movie, especially in a CBM. So we didn't see David Ayer's movie, similar to Justice League. That was not Zack Snyder's movie. Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut is not a director's cut because we never had a theatrical release of his vision. So Zack Snyder's Justice League is his extended version of what would have been his theatrical cut, and we were very lucky. It was beautiful. I've always wanted to see David Ayer's air cut of Suicide Squad. In fact, I was one of the few voices arguing and fighting for the air cut to be released back in 2021, just before the Snyder Cut. Because narratively, that story is told pre-Snyder Cut. It would have been great, but a lot of people didn't want that. I don't think Zack, let's just say, was vocal enough on David Ayer's movie or support for David Ayer's movie at the time, because he was trying to fight for his vision. And even that, when he was kind of putting together the Snyder Cut, WB Pictures were interfering with that, and he nearly walked away. And if it wasn't for us, the fans, he would have done. He only stayed for us. Imagine that. We found out after finding out we were getting, you know, the Snyder Cut in May of 2021, then to find out he walked away and we weren't going to get it. It would have been heartbreaking. So thank you, Zack, for staying there and putting up with those fucking idiots. So David has never got his movie. So what happened when James Gunn came out of exile after being fired temporarily by Disney and Marvel Studios? He was offered anything at DC Comics, and he decided he wanted the Suicide Squad. So we got a film written and directed by James Gunn, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Now, interestingly, it's not a reboot. It literally is a kind of a slight sequel to Ayer's movie that we never saw. But in fact, it's not even a sequel to Ayer's movie. It's a sequel to the theatrical cut that we've already explained isn't Ayer's movie. Still seeing people calling out David Ayer for the 2016 cut you saw in cinemas. It wasn't David's fucking movie. So David and James became fast friends, and James promised if he could support the movie, because there was a lot of opposition to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, because David wasn't doing it, and, you know, we felt that David had been betrayed enough, and, you know, he was going to do a Gotham City Sirens, he was going to do a Harley and the Joker. David and Zack had big plans for that Batman Rogues Gallery universe via David Ayer's Suicide Squad universe. We never got it. Now, at the time, James Gunn was nowhere near running DC, but he did make that promise. If David scratched his back, James would scratch his. A horrible fault, actually, while I say that, a horrible literal fault. But anyway, so now James Gunn is co-CEO of DC Studios. Of course, you already know that. So David has been passionately fighting and posting pictures on Instagram and Twitter, still fighting for the release, the Ayer cut, you know, to get the Ayer cut released. And nothing has come to fruition. So it's very, very interesting now, and it's interesting that all Access Media, all the broadsheets are talking about what David Ayer has said in the past few days. So David Ayer has said that there is people fighting for this movie who want to see this movie, including him, the writer-director of the movie. I want to see the movie. I know you, most of my subscribers, if not all of my subscribers, want to see the Ayer cut. And he's now publicly stated that James Gunn has promised him, since he's become co-CEO of DC Studios, that he will release the movie at the right time. I don't trust James Gunn to do this. I like James Gunn. I have no kind of axe to grind with James Gunn as such, but I don't trust James Gunn to do this. It's a bit like when my nieces and nephews say, Uncle, can I have some sweets? And I say, yeah, later. Can I do this? Yeah, later. And it never happens. That's how this situation feels. Because there's another bone of contention to me, and we'll talk about David's motivation of coming out publicly to discuss James Gunn's promise to release the Ayer cut at the right time. What does that even mean? But does James Gunn have any authority, you know, in green lighting stuff? James Gunn is a glorified showrunner. Narratively and storytelling-wise, he's in charge of DCU. He has no authority over Matt Reeves. I want to be clear about this. He don't get to tell Matt Reeves or Todd Phillips what to do. And if he did, and if he has, they would have laughed in his fucking face. I'm going to be clear about this. What's going on away from DC Universe and DC Elseworlds is nothing to do with James Gunn. He has no authority there. The only thing he's got authority of is the franchise he's creating. It's his baby, he's in charge, he says what goes and what doesn't. I don't believe for one moment he has any pull in releasing the Ayer cut. I will repeat that because I've said it many times. I've been very, very consistent about that. James Gunn has no pull or authority to release the air cut. You see, the big boss over there is Peter Safran, but even he has no authority over what Matt Reeves are doing or Todd Phillips, because it'll be very interesting as co-CEO of DC Studios if Gunn and Safran get producers credits on the Batman 2 and Joker Folie do. I would imagine they do, but it's in name only. They have no authority. No, I believe the only person who gets to decide whether the air cut is released is David Zaslav, and I don't know if he's willing to do that right now, but they could be getting air to set things in motion. Don't forget, we're in the middle of a SAG-AFTRA strike and a Writers Guild of America strike. Everything's dried up. There's very few things to release. Of course, they've made some things can still be released. We've got a full calendar this year. Already Sony have delayed things to 2024, so already, the garden isn't going to have much grass to mow, basically. Get my analogies right. But yeah, so it would be to their advantage with the situation they're in to release the air cut. Now, David's already explained to us there's not much to do. There's not the kind of work that Zack Snyder had to do to put together the Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder's Justice League had already been shot, but it had never been put together. Now, Junkie XL had done a different score, but that was binned, and he started from scratch. I've said that before. It was amazing that Junkie did a 4-hour brand new soundtrack for Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, fortunately for him, he had a year to do that, which was really exciting and brilliant. I don't know if we get to see the original symphonic score, or should I say hear the original symphonic score, or if that original composer, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, gets to rescore that movie. I doubt it. And I'm happy just to get the original symphonic score. And we just want to see this movie. But Warner Brothers may decide, because of these strikes, that this could be a bigger thing than we think. This could go beyond just an HBO Max release, potentially, if they decided to do it. Personally, I'd release it in cinemas. I would do a limited release in cinemas. I would release it straight away on physical and digital media and Max. I wouldn't wait. Release it all together, right? People can decide to go to movie theatres. People can decide to get it on physical media. Just do it all together. Just do it. Put it out there. Let the man have his day. Let us see the man's movie. David Ayer has done everything he promised the studio and James Gunn that he would do. It's time to get his reward. But this is why I'm very, very cynical about the whole situation. Because, it's going to be released at the right time. I've heard David Ayer say, let James make his movies, let him release Superman Legacy first. No. I don't think they have any intention, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't think they've got any intention of releasing this movie. Gunn is doing a second series of Peacemaker, right? He's doing Waller, which is all connected to his Suicide Squad movie. So is he really going to allow David Ayer's superior version to the original theatrical release of the 2016 movie to be released? What if it's better than James Gunn's The Suicide Squad? Even though I enjoyed James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, I don't think it's the greatest movie ever or anything like that. Look, James Gunn movies are good. I don't think they're great. I don't think he's Coppola. I don't think he's William Friedkin. I don't think he's he's Martin Scorsese like some of you cool modern kids think. But I think he's a good, capable writer-director, and there's no question about that. He's good at his job. He's not one of the best at his job. That is just simply my opinion. So I'm very, very cynical. So it's very interesting that David Ayer didn't even say this in an interview. I think someone asked him about the air cut, and basically saying, why do you keep on trying to get it released? And he explained there's a lot of people who want to see it, including David. David wants his movie released, quite right too. It's been a passion thing. He's been fighting hard to no avail. I don't think we're any closer to seeing the Ayer cut at this moment in time. When I hear that James Gunn has promised to release it at the right time, that sounds like a shallow, hollow promise. Because as I said on the top of the video, on the top of the show, you cannot trust these people. And it's interesting, isn't it? This is why I know that, well, James can't be trusted. When he came in and he spoke about a fractious environment around the DCEU and how he was going to sort that out. And he hasn't really helped that situation. He came in right and spoke about a fractious environment. Did he mean the fans? Did he mean the running of it? I think he meant both. And he was acting like none of it had nothing to do with him, because it didn't. But he didn't deal with that fractious environment very well. When my nieces and nephews, I'll use them as a comparison again, are arguing, I can't take a side. I've got to hear both sides of the story. I've got to calm the situation down. And what you don't do is blame one side or the other. Gunn came in and, you know, from the moment he decided not to go with Cavill as Superman, the Snyder fans and Cavill fans were going at him strongly for his historical tweets and his alleged links to, let's say, people of nefarious means without me going into details. So he pushed back. He called them a toxic fandom. That didn't help the situation because Gunn has got to be better than that. He doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut. So the more he pushes back, like when the fans said she misses Henry Cavill, and Gunn said, well, he's not dead. You know, things like that don't help. And he's just making himself a bigger and bigger target because it doesn't help that he interfered with the ending of The Flash, that we now know it was his idea to put George Clooney at the end of The Flash movie. A dumb idea. And the fact that he's interfering with James Wan's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Something I can tell you for definite James Wan isn't happy about. But as we get closer to the release date publicly, the two Jameses will be the best of friends. Welcome to Hollywood. The bullshit meter gets stronger the closer you get to the release date, as we all know at this point. So James Gunn hasn't done himself any favours. Speaking about a fractious environment, stirring the pot, you know, confusing people with comic book panels, you know, and really, he doesn't really seem to know if he's doing a soft reboot or a full reboot. He doesn't really seem to know what's going to be canon and what's not going to be canon because he keeps on changing his mind and saying different things. And, you know, the next DC movie that's coming out is projected to have an opening weekend, a domestic weekend, of 30 million. Well, that's not very good. Now, internationally, it'll be interesting. Will it even hit 100 million globally for its opening weekend? Whatever it does, it's not going to be a lot, and maybe we won't be able to class it as a flop, but I think definitely an underachiever, but this was never going to do anything but that. I mean, if it overachieved, it will be a sensational result. We'll see if audience come in for Blue Beetle. But he's calling it the first DCU character, but not the first DCU movie. So again, people are getting confused. But we're here to talk about David Ayer and the Ayer cut. And David Ayer has done something extremely intelligent and extremely clever. He's publicly stated that James Gunn has promised to release the Ayer cut at the right time at some point. That means he's put James Gunn in a very awkward situation because now the public, the fans, everyone is watching. And if James Gunn doesn't help release the Ayer cut, or if the Ayer cut is never released, then Gunn will be blamed. And it puts him in a very uncomfortable position. And this is why David Ayer has done it. David Ayer and James Gunn are not friends, no matter what you see on the internet, what you see on Twitter. David Ayer needs him, or feels he needs him, and needs to cozy up with him to get his movie released. So he's done that. But now he's gone deep. I don't believe when he said James Gunn promised me that he'd release the movie at some point, he said it as their mates. He's basically saying, mate, you made me a promise, and on that promise, I was very positive about your Suicide Squad movie at the time. Now, it's time for you, James, to pay up. This is what he means when he says James Gunn promised that at some point it would be released. He's not saying it because they're mates. He's putting pressure on James to keep his promise. And that's how I see the situation. David Ayer is playing hardball. Quite right too. I don't understand what the big deal is. Some people say, well, it'll be confusing. No, it won't. James Gunn is already confusing people. We've already had the DCEU constantly releasing movies, even though we're going down a new plan, soft reboot, full reboot, who the fuck knows anymore. It's confusing enough, right? Black Adam brought back Henry Cavill. Henry was going to come back, then he wasn't coming back. So it's been one shit show after another. We got that terrible cameo from Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot in Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the flop of the movie. Then Gal returned again, and Ben Affleck returned in a little appearance for the Flash movie, another disaster. Then we got Blue Beetle. Then finally we can say goodbye with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. It doesn't give me any pleasure to wave goodbye to the DCEU because Zack Snyder started off something special, and if only they let him finish off what he started, I think this could have been one of the greatest things we've ever seen since Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. And you may laugh, you may scoff at that, but I truly believe that. But this is why David Ayer has publicly stated that James Gunn assured him that one day, at the right time, the Ayer cut would be released. But I don't believe that James Gunn is that passionate about releasing the Ayer cut. It's something he promised a long time ago because he needed David's support when he was promoting his own Suicide Squad movie. And this is where we are now. So a lot of people are getting very, very excited about what David has said. I would hold up. I would hold off on the gas and press on the brakes because I don't believe this changes anything. Oh yes, it gives us something to talk about. Oh yes, Deadline and Variety are doing full articles about it because we've got Hollywood at a standstill. They've got nothing to talk about. So it's a very interesting, fun thing to talk about, but we're no closer to getting this movie released. It's not James Gunn or Safran or Zaslav coming out vocally about this movie. It's just David Ayer. He has no authority when or if this movie will be released. And, that's where we are. It's a sad situation. I feel bad for David Ayer because he deserves better. And his film deserved better. And it should have been released as, David envisioned it. Now, that really rarely happens. I mean, there's films like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves that were interfered with. The studio corporate structure has always interfered with people's visions, but in a different way, I think. I think today it's gone on another level. They're so nervous. There's so much more money. It's all about money now. You see, films and Hollywood wasn't always about money. Some of the stuff was released for artistic integrity, and some of it, like the Arnie and Sly and Bruce Willis stuff, was released, back in the day when I was growing up, to make money. And so there was different films. So there was a balance in Hollywood. Now it's all about what the box office is, what the Rotten Tomatoes scores are, and very little about a film these days is about the film and the viewing experience. It's about how big its aubergine is, right? If you get what I'm saying. We've seen the boasting over the success or the alleged success of the Barbie movie. Greta, you know, Greta is the first female director who's achieved this, or that, or the other. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Yes, the film's successful, so what? It's successful because it was promoted by Universal instead of its own studio. And it jumped on the shoulders of Oppenheimer, a really epic, compelling biopic. And that's why it's successful. As I've said before, I'm glad people are going there and enjoying it. That's great. But in terms of David Ayer, in terms of the Ayer cut, I don't think anything has changed with this situation. Now, personally, if I was running Warner Brothers Pictures, I'd be saying, do you know what? We got this strike. We need some positivity. DC movies aren't doing very well. Let's release this movie. But they're scared of this movie because they're scared of Snyder. Because they know if this movie gets released, the Snyder fans are out again. Yeah, we're going to restore the Snyderverse. Oh my God, this movie was better than James Gunn's movie. Things like that. They know that. They're scared of Snyder. They're scared of his fans. And they don't want that stuff getting popular again. But here's the thing. You can make money from that stuff. So fucking what? The Snyder conversation is never ever going to end. The Ayer cut conversation is never ever going to end. You should have allowed the man to finish what he started. You shouldn't have been cutting out stuff from your DC documentary and putting Justice League clips in it. But your motivations are not our motivations. Hollywood are just weird. They don't like being proven wrong. They don't like being exposed. Well, Zack Snyder and his fans, exposed these fuckwits a long time ago. And it's interesting to me how different is Warner Brothers now under Zaslav. Is it really the same Warner Brothers Pictures that it was under Emmerich and the same DC it was under Hamada? I suspect so. Because Gunn and Safran are Team Hamada, are Team Emmerich. We already know that. We know who brought in Hamada. We know that Emmerich brought in James Gunn, right? So nothing's really changing there. The only thing is, if creatively James Gunn can pull this off. He's given us titles. He's given us his ideas. Some of them sound quite neat, I will admit. But it's all about the execution. And we haven't seen that execution yet. So why not release the Ayer cut? The only thing it damages is people's egos. And this is why they never wanted to release the Snyder cut. And it was only because of John Stankey, the head CEO of AT&T, who decided himself over the studio's head that the Snyder cut would get released, and WB Pictures weren't even happy about that. But I'll go back to the point that they wouldn't have Snyder in the DC documentary, that they wouldn't have any Snyder cut clips in the DC documentary. There's still a portion at WB Pictures that despise Zack Snyder. He's credited Adby and DeLuca. But where were they when, these clips will be cutting out from a DC documentary celebrating DC? And the Snyder cut should fundamentally be part of that celebration, shouldn't it? Why? Because it's one of the biggest, most famous situations in DC history. And the film is one of the best DC live action movies and artistically one of the best things in DC film or even CBM in general we have ever seen. So there's still an element there who hates Snyder. And if you hate Snyder, you hate Ayer. If you didn't want the Snyder cut to be released, you won't want the Ayer cut to be released either. Are you getting me? Do you understand? So with this portion of WB Pictures still there, the same people from the Emmerich and Hamada regime, there's a problem. And Gunn is also part of that regime because they brought him in the first place. That doesn't mean he can't make DC Universe successful. It does mean we still have a big toxic problem. And the toxicity has nothing to do with the customer.